Said the Allies have destroyed 270 tanks, including some of Iraq's best.
I wouldn't say it's one-sided. I would just say that we're enjoying success where we're meeting the enemy, we're defeating the enemy.
More than 500 oil wells are on fire in Kuwait, half the wells in the whole country. And the Iraqis are taking out their vengeance on Kuwait and its people.
Additionally, numerous facilities throughout Kuwait City are being systematically destroyed. Reports of atrocities of the worst sort are continuing to come in through reports.
Enemy prisoners continued to surrender in droves, 18,000 in 2 days. Allied commanders said they were not surprised.
I think we're gratified by the number of prisoners being taken. This, after all, is what the alliance had planned for with the conditioning of the battlefield over the last few weeks.
In the Persian Gulf, Iraq fired a Chinese-made Silkworm missile at the U.S. battleship Missouri. The British shot it down. The Scud missile attack here in Saudi Arabia a few hours ago killed at least 12 U.S. servicemen and wounded 25. 40 others are still missing. Harry Smith was the first reporter on the scene.
The routine Monday night Scud warning was not followed by the usual Patriot missile intercept. The alarm was followed by disaster.
One of these ambulances has to go up there. All the people are up here.
A flimsy warehouse converted into a barracks for U.S. Army personnel was blown to bits. Inside, more than 100 American soldiers.
I knew right away that this was a direct Scud hit, just judging by the way that it shook the ground and by the enormously loud explosion of the score.
Big fire, and then I heard boom.
Fully 20 minutes after the attack, chaos reigned. Ambulances clogged the single alleyway leading to the compound. For some of the wounded, the only way out was medevac choppers. The time between warning and impact was short, perhaps 2 minutes. The U.S. military says it appeared the Scud may have broken up in flight, but clearly the results suggest otherwise.
It's total. The whole thing's gone. Everybody in it is either wounded or dead.
Never before had an Iraqi Scud hit an American target. The attitude towards Scuds in this part of the world had become blasé.
And so I think people were just taking it for granted that they weren't going to get harmed or one of these Scuds was going to get through and actually make contact. And today, unfortunately, it did.
Baghdad radio hailed its heroic missile corps, while U.S. forces stood shocked by Saddam Hussein's act of terrorism. Harry Smith, CBS News, Saudi Arabia.
The military people think of the rear, the main battleground, and then the far forward. The Scud hit in the rear. Now, as for the main battlegrounds, think of them as west and east in the southern Iraqi desert and then up against the Persian Gulf. It's not quiet on either front. On the western front, where Allied forces are punching into Iraq, Scott Pelley is there.
On the second day of the invasion, U.S. and French forces moved rapidly into the Iraqi homeland, advancing under cover of a massive artillery barrage. The thrust came west of Kuwait, part of the effort to cut off enemy supplies and reinforcements. All along the Western Front, resistance was light. Here, there were no U.S. casualties the first 24 hours.
I'm very surprised. Right now, I thought that they would put up more of a fight.
Iraqi soldiers surrendered en masse. By the second morning, they were being taken in caravans of buses. The advance was slowed while French and American troops stopped to search and arrest the enemy soldiers. The Iraqis were under Allied artillery bombardment for hours, and when the French infantry moved through this sector, they said the Iraqis threw down their arms without firing a single shot.
No more. No more.
My biddy war.
No more.
But these are far from Saddam's best troops. This frontline force has little training and poor equipment. Many of the men did not have boots to wear. Most were armed with outdated, broken-down weapons. Iraqis killed in battle are being buried by U.S. soldiers. This soldier was killed in an air attack while apparently carrying food to the front. The U.S. is preparing for thousands of enemy dead.
We'll have to get approval from theater commander in order to open a mass grave, but in my opinion, that would be the best way to handle
it. In the first 2 days, heavy artillery was the key to withering Iraqi resolve. Howitzers were constantly on the move north.
Talk to me, talk to me!
Despite the speed, soldiers were warned repeatedly to sight their targets with care. The smallest error here could bring shells down on friendly forces. In the first day, the invasion of the Iraqi sector ran far ahead of schedule. But as the guns were pulled deeper into enemy territory, some soldiers became apprehensive. The initial surge was swift, but the toughest battles may lie ahead. Scott Pelley, CBS News, with Allied forces in southern Iraq.
That's the western part of the main battlefield. Now for the eastern part, inside Kuwait. CBS News reporter Bob McEwen is moving up with an Allied force headed straight for Kuwait City.
Allied armor rolled up the highway towards Kuwait City today, 24 hours into the invasion, 25 miles down, and 45 to go. This attack force of Saudis, Kuwaitis, Omanis, and U.S. Marines encountered little resistance for the first half of their journey, but a burned-out Iraqi tank marked the beginning of a more dangerous stretch of road. In the area, towns such as this one, with pockets of Iraqi resistance and snipers, and a few miles ahead, enemy artillery, sending in round after round, hitting houses nearby and pinning down the convoy. As Saudi tanks moved into position, U.S. jets worked the skies, launching flares to distract ground-air missiles, high-tech vultures searching for their prey. As the battle continued at the front, at the border, vehicles continued to pour into Kuwait, including buses to bring back prisoners of war. And along the route north, the desert was a massive minefield, being swept by Kuwaitis in helicopters and Saudis on foot. All afternoon, the jets kept circling overhead, the artillery coming in and going out. As the second day of the ground war came to an end, the troops hunkered down here along the highway, hope that this will turn out to be just a rest stop on their road to Kuwait City. In addition to the constant rumble of bombardment here on the Eastern Front tonight, there's been something else to think about, a ghostly glow from burning oil wells in the northern sky, leading the Allies to wonder what exactly they'll find along the road to Kuwait City tomorrow. Dan?
Bob, earlier you talked about the ground rumbling and shaking underneath you as the guns from the battleships Missouri and Wisconsin offshore fired. Has there been any of that firing during the night?
The last artillery barrage came in here about dusk. We haven't heard anything from the Gulf, from the warships. What we have seen, in addition to that glow you saw a moment ago, is a tremendous light show out towards the north. We've seen flares lighting up the desert. We've seen tracers. We've seen Allied rockets going over our heads. We've seen a tank battle down a couple of miles in front of us. The Iraqis are that close at this point. There are burning oil wells behind me as well, as you can see. Two of them have been burning for a couple of days now. A third, which is inland a bit, is obscured by smoke right now. It erupted tonight. We're not exactly sure whether this is one of the hundreds of wells that are alleged to have been set by the Iraqis in the past few days, or whether that was brought aflame in some other way. Along the highway towards the front today, we bumped into a battalion, a tank battalion of Kuwaitis. They told us they were going off to rout some Iraqis out of that oil field, and it is possible that that third fire, which you may or may not see at the moment, came about in that way.
Bob McEwen, live from deep inside Kuwait. Now just above, in front of where Bob McEwen is, the U.S. Marines have been engaged for some hours in a furious battle against a counterattacking Iraqi armor division. This special edition of the CBS Evening News, live from Saudi Arabia, continues in a moment with the latest on the strategy from the Pentagon and the White House.
Now you can ask Angela Lansbury about Bufferin.
Angela, for a miserable backache, is Bufferin really strong aspirin?
Oh, my, yes. I've learned extra strength Bufferin has the strongest dose of aspirin you can buy, 1,000 milligrams.
Miss Lansbury, how can Bufferin be so strong if it has buffers?
I wondered myself, till I heard that the buffers don't weaken it. They just help prevent aspirin's stomach upset. I depend on Bufferin.
Shouldn't you discover the strength of Bufferin?
Ask me what counts most after 40 years in the car business, and I don't have to think twice. 1, the minivans. We invented them. 2, driver's airbags in every car we build in this country. What do we do for an encore? put them together. Minivans with a driver's side airbag. Nobody else is doing it. You still have to use your seatbelt with a minivan airbag, but it will save lives. A lot of lives.
You know, you get so much more out of cold mornings when you've got energy. That's why I eat grape nuts. And I found a great new way to make it hot. Just pour your grape nut cereal, add milk, and microwave it for 1 minute. You've got this warm, hearty taste that feels so good, and a natural energy source to help keep you going. So, even if it's a cold morning, hot grape nuts helps make it a good one. Try it yourself.
Hot or cold, breakfast with Post Grape Nuts helps keep you going strong all morning long.
We want to make clear that throughout our coverage, we are sensitive to the safety of American and Allied troops. We try to report nothing that will be of military use to the Iraqis. What we report in our own exclusive reports from the battlefront and from pool coverage is all aimed at trying to tell you at home what you want to know, what you need to know, without endangering lives over here. With that in mind, CBS News correspondent David Martin has the latest war overview from the Pentagon. David?
Dan, officials here say that the campaign schedule is still about 12 hours ahead of schedule. But today, I think, was clearly a tougher day of fighting than yesterday, particularly for the Marines and U.S. Army units who were fighting in Kuwait. The Iraqi Army committed some of its armored reserves, and the Marines and the U.S. Army had to take them on. They did well and are moving ahead, but there was an engagement there which was, I think, the first real tank battle of the war.
David, I'll pause for just a second because we thought we were getting a late report in. In fact, the reports from the battle scene indicate that the Marines have done very well against that Iraqi armored division. And for the Iraqis to bring an armored division out of their holes into the open where it can be hit upon by air power, and the Marines to hold against that is no small accomplishment. What should we be looking for on the two main battlefronts, southern Iraq and inside Kuwait, over the next 8 to 12 hours?
Well, inside Kuwait, the thing to look for is the assault on Kuwait City itself, the attempt to liberate the city. That's going to involve house-to-house fighting. Out west in Iraq, I think we're still probably 24 to 36 hours away from this great tank battle that everybody is anticipating between all of the U.S. armored forces that are inside Iraq and the Republican Guards, which are still hunkered down in southern Iraq. Dan?
Thanks, David. Saddam Hussein's latest maneuver, this announcing that he'd ordered his troops out of Kuwait, came as President Bush said the war was going well, and the president cautioned against overconfidence. White House correspondent Wyatt Andrews has late reaction there. Wyatt?
Dan, the president gave what in effect was his first report card to the nation today, reporting that things were going well. But he spoke just hours before that Scud hit the Army barracks outside of Dhahran, and almost as if he predicted or foresaw that attack, Mr. Bush predicted that the Allies would suffer some setbacks.
The liberation of Kuwait is on course and on schedule. We have the initiative. We intend to keep it. We must guard against euphoria. There are battles yet to come and casualties to be borne.
Despite his appeal for caution, the president is obviously confident. He's already talking about what comes next.
And our success in the Gulf will bring with it not just a new opportunity for peace and stability in a critical part of the world, but a chance to build a new world order based upon the principles of collective security and the rule of law.
As it turned out, the entire national security team was briefing the president at the very moment that the Scud attack on the Army barracks was launched. The White House later termed that attack tragic, but saw it as a bit of luck that will not alter the outcome of the war. Dan?
Thanks, Wyatt. Coming up next on tonight's CBS Evening News live from Saudi Arabia, we'll be checking in Baghdad. Correspondent Betsy Aaron and talking about this latest maneuver of Saddam's.
The reason 2 Oldsmobiles made the 1991 Consumers Digest Best Buys list is based on the same philosophy Oldsmobiles are built by. Exceptional value.
This is the new generation of Olds.
This is Jupiter. Not exactly what you imagined, huh? Same atmosphere? Hairdos. But believe me, Jupiter's an advanced civilization. Just look at the menu. There's beef tenderloin at just 179 calories. That's hardly astronomical. Well, 1 small steak for me, 1 giant barbecue for mankind. Beef. Real food in Jupiter, Florida.
I thought my husband Dan was perfectly healthy, but the doctor said his cholesterol level was 218. So we changed to a healthier diet, including no cholesterol Mazola, America's leading corn oil.
In a clinical study, a low-fat, low-cholesterol diet, including Mazola, reduced cholesterol an average of 17%.
Did Dan's cholesterol come down?
You bet. 100% pure Mazola corn oil. Together, we're beating cholesterol.
Doctors know there's a flaw in eggs. They're high in cholesterol, and diets high in cholesterol and fat can contribute to heart disease. Fleischmann's Egg Beaters are 99% real egg with 0 cholesterol and 0 fat. Egg Beaters, eggs without the flaw.
The ground war. Allied forces continue their massive push into Kuwait. Dan Rather joins Charles Kuralt and Leslie Stahl on a special 1-hour edition of America Tonight.
Saddam Hussein calls it the mother of all battles. In Washington, Saddam's moves, even his latest supposed order pull out of Kuwait, are viewed more as a motherlode of miscalculations. Mark Phillips reports.
One by one, the great Gulf gambler has played his cards. His hand may not have been as strong as first feared, but those who have studied him say he isn't finished yet.
I'd never want to play cards with this guy as my partner. He tried the Israeli card, and last week he tried the Soviet card, and that was a failure. The only card he has left to play is to use chemical weapons and to commit extraordinary acts of violence in the hope that somehow we will overreact and that will win him some grace in the next world.
But Saddam still seems concerned with this world, and unconstrained by political pressure at home and seemingly unconstrained by conscience, he can sacrifice armies. He can put lands to the torch.
When he is backed into a corner, he can become dangerous to the extreme and really lash out, and I believe he is now in that lash-out mode.
In his radio address as the ground war began, Saddam claimed the mother of all battles would be a more even fight. For the first time, though, Saddam acknowledged the possibility of defeat, and this man who has been compared to Hitler may be capable of Hitlerian actions.
I always see an analogy here with the closing days of World War II as the Allies moved deeper into Germany and saw what Hitler had done, the mood stiffened. And I think when the television finally gets into Kuwait City and the world's press starts unearthing what this army has done for the past 6 months, the mood is going to harden even more.
There may be, however, one element of the Hitler comparison that doesn't hold true.
Unlike Hitler, to whom he has been likened, who suicided at the end, I believe Saddam desperately wants to survive, and survive with a portion of his power base still retained.
The successful gambler, though, knows when to fold a losing hand, and that may be behind today's withdrawal offer. For Saddam, this has been a quest to find a way out that preserves some sense of honor, and getting out with at least part of his army would provide that. And as Saddam showed today, even in defeat, he's still capable of making the Allies pay for their victory in blood. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Washington.
Back in the United States tonight, a new poll shows overwhelming support holding up for the ground war. That story and more when the CBS Evening News continues live from Saudi Arabia. Equipped for combat, but armed with overwhelming support from the American people. The support for U.S. forces was strong going in. The support continues for forcing Saddam Hussein out. Bruce Morton reports these feelings run wide and deep on the home front.
Americans want Saddam Hussein out. A CBS News New York Times poll last night asked, even though the United Nations authorized the use of force only to get Iraq out of Kuwait, Should the U.S. continue fighting until Saddam is removed from power? A solid majority said yes, get him out.
If he could ever come back to get you, he's going to come back to get you. You know, what I call ghetto fighting. Hey, you fight to the end.
Oh, I think we should take him out of power entirely.
Even if removing Saddam costs several thousand additional American lives, those who want him out said it would be worth that cost.
We don't wish to have any casualties. We expect them, and we can't stop at this point because we've taken a few casualties.
3/4 of our sample thought President Bush had done the right thing in starting the ground war instead of waiting longer to see if bombing alone would win. And by an even bigger margin, our sample thought the U.S. and Iraq were so far apart, a negotiated settlement was not possible.
No, there's enough diplomacy. I think if they would have waited any longer, more Kuwaiti citizens would have been butchered, mass murdered.
The people we polled think the war is going well so far, not surprising since the military briefers have said that. But our sample knows that that could change. A majority thought the war would last weeks or months. Only about 1 person in 5 thought it would be over in a matter of days.
I personally think that by the end of March, the war will be pretty much over with.
Asked if the war was worth several thousand American lives, our sample said yes. Men thought the sacrifice worthwhile by better than 2 to 1. Women were evenly divided.
People look to us to lead, and I do think we did the right thing, yes.
Given this strong approval of the war, it's not surprising our sample thinks President Bush is doing well. 87% approve of the job he's doing as president. That's the same approval rating Harry Truman got after VE Day, after the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II.
I think Bush is doing all right. I don't have any problems with the man. I don't think there was any other way he could have avoided the war.
People we polled were less happy with Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev. Asked if his efforts to negotiate a settlement were meant at bringing about peace or at increasing Soviet influence in the Gulf, our sample lopsidedly said Gorbachev was seeking not peace, but Soviet power. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Washington.
A Scud missile has killed Americans inside Saudi Arabia. Americans are engaged in considerable fighting inside Kuwait and inside Iraq. We'll bring you updates throughout the evening on this CBS station, and I'll be back as part of a War Update edition of America Tonight later on. Now, for those stations leaving us now, we say good night. For those continuing with our special 1-hour edition of the CBS Evening News, see you in a moment.
CBS's expanded coverage of the Gulf War. A Current Affair will air at 7:30 p.m.
Recapping our top stories, a surprise announcement on Baghdad radio a short while ago saying Saddam Hussein now has ordered his troops to withdraw from Kuwait in accordance with the Soviet peace plan the Allied coalition and President Bush had already rejected. First White House reaction, the war goes on. Day 2 of the land war brought more Allied gains, but more heavy fighting. Iraq played its terror cards with a vengeance. A Scud missile attack killed at least 12 Americans here inside Saudi Arabia. Eric Ingberg reports.
Iraq's Scud missile campaign, previously dismissed by U.S. commanders as militarily insignificant, tonight brought home the hazards and unpredictability of war. A Scud, or pieces of a Scud that was breaking up, tore through the roof of a building housing U.S. troops in northern Saudi Arabia, inflicting the heaviest casualties of any Iraqi action of the war so far. On the battlefield, U.S. and Allied units have now captured from 18 to 20,000 prisoners while destroying 270 enemy tanks as the offensive proceeds along a broad front, but not as speedily as it did yesterday.
We are continuing to attack and continue to achieve tremendous success against the Iraqi forces in the KTO.
American Marines and Saudi forces pushing into Kuwait hit pockets of resistance today. 45 miles south of Kuwait City, houses were ablaze from artillery duels, and troops stopped while minefields were cleared away. Roads were littered with thousands of mines, which combat engineers had to use wooden sticks to dig out. On the western border of Kuwait, Egyptian armored columns have broken through defensive barriers. The American units, which yesterday surged across the Iraq border, today reported little resistance, continuing their task of building an armored wall between the elite Iraqi troops dug in on the Kuwait border and the rest of Iraq. Elements of the 18th Airborne Corps, accompanied by French troops, paused to process Iraqi prisoners and, in one case, to bury enemy dead. The Allies said Iraq's scorched earth policy, blamed for 500 oil field fires, is also becoming a bloodbath in Kuwait City, where the Saudi military says the streets are littered with civilian corpses.
They even try to force their own Iraqi very young soldiers to kill another Kuwaiti children, those type of things, which is, if I elaborate in it, it's so horrible.
With the Allies at the edge of Kuwait City and the Republican Guards close to encirclement, Saddam might have thought now was a good time to talk ceasefire. But the Scud attacks and the new atrocity reports only made it harder to believe that peace was anywhere near at hand. Eric Engberg, CBS News, Saudi Arabia.
For analysis, background, and additional insight now on the battles underway, let's go to Bob Schieffer in New York. Bob?
Dan, Saddam Hussein says that he is doing this to comply with a Soviet initiative at the UN, but working with our military consultants, retired Air Force Chief of Staff Mike Dugan, General George Christ, retired Marine General. I think there may be other reasons for this move that Saddam Hussein has announced tonight. General Christ, why don't you start, use the map, show us what's happened.
Bob, Saddam may now suspect that the jaws of the trap are about to close. The 82nd and the French are moving to block to the west. Our armor with the 7th Corps is now moving up from the south. He may be very worried that he's going to lose the city of Basra. And Bob, Basra has great symbology. It's the second largest city in Iraq. They fought for 8 years and thousands of lives to try to keep that city out of the hands of the Iranians. If Saddam Hussein loses Basra, he's going to lose his job.
All right, well, let's talk about this withdrawal, if indeed he does try to do that, General Dugan. What would that involve? That would not be an easy task, it seems to me.
No, Bob, he has told his forces to withdraw orderly. I mean, this is a combat move. This is not an administrative move. And while there is some reference to, in accordance with UN Resolution 660, this, in fact, is a combat withdrawal. This is a combat move back. Saddam has admitted to his forces that they are under fire, and they're going to continue to be under fire.
Well, let's suppose they head north, and those U.S. forces are there. Those U.S. commanders are not going to let him come through there with his tanks.
The rules have changed since the discussions last week initiated by President Gorbachev, and we are now putting ourselves in a blocking position, as General Christ mentioned. And while we're going to encourage withdrawal, we're going to have them drop off their arms, drop off their tanks, leave the chemical weapons behind, and they can get on the road and walk back to Baghdad, I suspect. President Bush will.
But leave the tanks in place.
I suspect that that's why the President will give the directions.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Back to you, Dan.
Dave McMartin at the Pentagon has some late word. David?
Well, Dan, there's a very confused picture right now with exactly what the Iraqi army is doing. There is some movement among Iraqi troops. The first reaction was that they were preparing to launch a chemical attack, but now they're not so sure. There may be some movement going on, but people say it is much too soon to call this a withdrawal. Dan?
Thanks, David. American troops, Marines, and U.S. Army troops fighting their way deep into Kuwait. First objective to try to take Kuwait City, find themselves burdened by an enormous logistics headache. Droves of Iraqi soldiers throughout the whole battlefront, at least 18,000, perhaps as many as 20,000 so far, have surrendered. More about that from Martha Teichner.
The sight of hundreds, even thousands of Iraqi soldiers giving themselves up was the first shock of the ground war.
Looks like a bunch of them up in front, but I can't tell.
There is a real danger that so many prisoners will slow down the war. One advancing unit took a look at the approaching procession and kept right on going, telling the surrendering Iraqis, "We don't have time for you now."
Not only might they possibly interfere with our combat actions and cause injury to U.S. soldiers, but we don't want them injured either.
The success of a leaflet campaign encouraging Iraqi soldiers to surrender could become a mixed blessing. The Allied policy is to get prisoners out of the battlefield as quickly as possible, to shuttle them to the rear in trucks or buses. The Allies planned on 100,000 prisoners, but can handle twice that. So there is no need for forced marches on foot yet.
There's a certain element of sympathy for them because they're so poorly equipped, and the way their well-being, you know, they're human beings also, and we're treating them as such, taking as good a care as we can of them.
An Iraqi soldier's first meal as a prisoner is often an MRE, what U.S. soldiers eat. Many can expect better treatment as prisoners than they got serving in their own army. The Saudis even intend to pay them 6 times more than required by international law. But first they are processed.
We search them, we silence them, we segregate them, speed and safeguard. We do it as quick as we possibly can in a safe way.
The prisoners taken so far represent not quite 4% of Saddam Hussein's army. The Allies believe that by the time the war is finally over, they will have taken more than 20%. Numbers that look startling now may look insignificant then. Martha Teichner, CBS News, Dhahran.
One part of this still unfolding story is the expected amphibious landing of Marines offshore in the Gulf. A report on the Navy's troubles and why that landing hasn't happened yet when the CBS Evening News continues live from Saudi Arabia.
Join me, John, Wendell, and my wife, Kathy, on an exciting adventure to beautiful Alaska this July 8th to the 16th. We'll fly to Anchorage and then in Valdez enjoy a cruise to Columbia Glacier. In Fairbanks, Alaska's Golden Pass will come alive on the paddle wheeler Discovery. And in Denali National Park, we'll see majestic...
...in a classic amphibious landing. Because of Iraqi mines and the U.S. Navy's problems with those mines, it may never happen. Juan Vasquez has been with the Leathernecks.
The Marines have never been known to run away from a good fight. That's why the thousands of Marines aboard naval ships in the Persian Gulf were crushed to discover that the ground war began without them.
I'd say for the most part, we'd all feel cheated if we didn't get to participate in it.
You know, I would be disappointed if we didn't get a chance to, you know, hit the beach because that's our job. Look in there, see how you see the picture?
After months of training, their job is the stuff that Marine legends are made of, an amphibious assault. They're so eager to fight, they say they can outperform their own heroes.
We'll be more effective, a lot more effective than the old John Wayne type of storming the beach and up and in like that.
But even though they're so close to the action they can smell the smoke, the amphibious landing has been delayed because the sea lanes approaching Kuwait are densely mined. Just last week, the guided missile cruiser Princeton and the Tripoli, a helicopter assault carrier, were damaged by mines.
The coast of Kuwait may be the most heavily fortified section of coast in naval history.
There are unconfirmed reports of fighting on Failaka Island, which may yet be a target for the Marines because of its strategic location. Even if these sophisticated assault vehicles are never used to carry Marines into Kuwait, commanders say their troops have served a vital purpose.
Keep in mind the number of Iraqi units we have tied down on the coasts, and as long as they're watching the coast and they're not engaging our units that are working in Kuwait now and further west.
A ranking naval officer said the Navy was surprised at the extent and complexity of the minefields in the Persian Gulf. It's the sort of thing that doesn't just slow you down, he said, it brings you to a dead stop. Juan Vasquez, CBS News, Eastern Saudi Arabia.
Coalition unity in the battle for Kuwait is holding up well. Reporter Bill Whitaker in London has found that the same cannot be said in the big dollar battle to repair the damage of war.
As Allied troops prepare to enter Kuwait City, Kuwaiti exiles brace themselves for the human and physical devastation they will find.
We have assumed the total destruction of electricity, water distillation plants, telecommunication, medical services, medical supplies.
The price tag for reconstruction, $50 to $100 billion. And allies who are fighting together on the battlefield now are battling each other over the high-stakes spoils of war. The U.S. has won the first skirmish, with businesses like construction giant Bechtel and Motorola Electronics grabbing more than 70% of initial reconstruction contracts. Some U.S. officials say that's only fair.
America was called upon to help. And so therefore, when that part of the operation is over, then America should be the one to be given the first opportunity again.
But British businesses like Weir, which built this desalting plant in Kuwait before the war, fear the U.S. is trying to squeeze them out.
I think there are undoubted fears, but we've got to get in there and do our bit to make sure that
we get our share of what's going. I think it will be a competitive situation.
The Brits are fighting back with a glossy brochure trumpeting British expertise. They even sent Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd to Saudi Arabia to promote British interests.
Britain is playing a leading role alongside the United States in the liberation of Kuwait, and we want to play a leading role in the reconstruction of Kuwait.
The Kuwaitis say there's enough to go around, at least for those who fought on the front lines.
I don't want now to say we're separating those who participated from those who didn't, but definitely those who participated will be given due consideration.
The big losers in all this could be the Germans and the Japanese who sat out the war. But like the battle for Kuwait, the battle in the boardrooms goes on. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, London.
What are the Germans, the Koreans, and the Japanese to help in the war effort? More about that when we come back. Rejected by the Allies, new stress cracks appeared today in U.S.-Soviet relations. The Soviets heaped criticism on President Bush's decision to go ahead with the land campaign. In Washington, Bill Plant is tracking political fallout from the ground war. Bill?
Dan, just before the Iraqis renewed their withdrawal offer through the Soviets, the Communist Party newspaper Pravda reached back for the rhetoric of the Cold War to blast U.S. motives in the war against Iraq. It said the U.S. was grabbing for world power. Now, Soviet cooperation, of course, was the key to lining up the coalition and to getting those 12 United Nations Security Council resolutions against Iraq. But now, in the wake of the Soviet peace plan, which failed initially, there's speculation that conservatives in Moscow are getting their day, their chance to talk. Administration officials who went out of their way to praise that Soviet peace plan are downplaying the criticism, just as they downplay euphoria over Allied successes. The British, on the other hand, express no caution about the progress of the land war. Newspaper headlines declaring victory practically jumped off the page in London this morning, and the British Foreign Secretary, talking about the possibility of having to deal with Saddam Hussein after the war, openly ridiculed the Iraqi leader.
Saddam Hussein was completely bogus, a puffed up frog of a man.
U.S. and Britain have been in lockstep since the war began. But some in Congress expressed concern today that some of the other allies, Germany, Japan, and Korea, aren't doing enough.
There are no three countries on the planet that owe their prosperity and well-being more to the United States than those three countries. And yet, when we look at the cost of this war, those three countries are really doing the least.
The administration actually gives all of the allies higher marks than that, but it is very wary of attempts to split them off. And today's withdrawal order is the kind of thing that could do that if it is actually carried out. Officials here at the State Department say that the U.S. will want to test that offer. They frankly think at this point that it is probably just a ploy. Dan?
Bill Plant at the State Department. Some of the people who have the most at stake in this Gulf War have been heard from the least, the Palestinians who live in the Israeli-occupied territories. This is not by accident, as correspondent Bill McLaughlin reports.
Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip have been the invisible people of this war. They've spent most of it behind the closed doors of their homes, under a strict, round-the-clock Israeli military curfew that has shut schools, shops, and businesses for weeks on end.
Israel is waging a campaign to destroy the livelihood of Palestinians, economically, educationally, and then I don't need to tell you the psychological impact.
We can't speak, we can't sleep, we can't go, we can't travel, we can't teach, we can't... All our universities are closed.
Palestinians have also suffered a major political setback in this war by siding with Saddam Hussein and cheering on Iraqi scuds aimed at Tel Aviv.
Both Arab and Israeli intellectuals agree that PLO leader Yasser Arafat made a major blunder in siding so openly with Saddam Hussein. Not only has the PLO lost the financial support of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, it's given the Israeli government the excuse it needed to avoid any talks with Arafat's PLO.
The PLO has been shooting himself in the feet, and for many Israelis, and including the Israeli government, it is no longer acceptable that the PLO would be included as a partner in a future negotiating process.
But ordinary Palestinians don't see themselves as losers. Saddam is still their hero, and they still desperately hope he'll defeat the U.S. and its allies.
There is the angels work with this man. Angels from God work with this man.
I don't know if he is right, he's wrong. He wants to save me. What should I think about this man? He's a bad man?
Even if Saddam is defeated and the PLO discredited, the bitterness and despair of the Palestinians will remain. Israeli military curfews may have made Palestinians invisible for now, but neither they nor their demands for a land of their own will vanish. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
News personnel in Baghdad continue to seek the release of our colleagues and friends Bob Simon, Peter Bluff, Roberto Alvarez, and Juan Caldera. The 4 CBS newsmen were seized by Iraqi forces 5 weeks ago while covering the war near the Saudi-Kuwaiti border. Now, I'll be back in a moment with another CBS News exclusive frontline report on the desert warfare, so stay here with us.
Show off your style.
Violence today in Cairo in support of Saddam Hussein. Riot police with clubs and tear gas turned back thousands of Egyptian students who threw stones and chanted, "Iraq will not die." The protesters denounced President Mubarak and Egypt's role in the Allied coalition. That role is large and prominent. CBS News correspondent Richard Threlkeld has an exclusive report from his travels with the Egyptian troops pushing into Kuwait.
Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox in the Second World War, wrote, "If you want to understand desert warfare, study the Navy." True enough, on this day inside Kuwait, an armada of Egyptian armor maneuvers in a sea of sand. The 32,000 Egyptian troops have one of the toughest combat missions of all, to attack the Iraqi defenses head-on from the center of the Allied line. There are interruptions, a poison gas alert, one of the hideous hazards of modern warfare for soldiers and combat correspondents alike. As it happens, a false alarm. A breach has now been made in the Iraqi minefields and trenches just north of here, and batteries of 122mm rocket launchers pave the way forward, like so many deadly Roman candles. But in the end, this desert war is a war like any other, to be won or lost by these Egyptian GIs with names like Ali and Muhammad and Fuad, who've been gone from Cairo 7 months now, and just like the American GIs, want to get this all over and go home. The Egyptian government has made a political decision not to cross Iraqi territory, but here in Kuwait, the Egyptian army is punishing the Iraqis with no qualms involved. In fact, Egyptian commanders have told us they'd like nothing better than to go all the way to Baghdad. But the mission is to liberate Kuwait. And to our right and left for hundreds of miles, hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers are now doing just that. Richard Threlkeld, CBS News, in one newly liberated corner of Kuwait.
Under a clear sky and a three-quarters moon in southern Iraq, the U.S. 82nd Airborne with the British is reported dashing to the Euphrates River. The apparent goal is to cut supply and escape routes against the Republican Guard. Lower down, the 101st Airborne is doing much the same thing. They are all covering, in effect, the left flank of a U.S. Army 7th Corps main force. That American main force appears to be in the early stages of maneuvering to engage the Republican Guard. This American desert force has an estimated 50,000 men, many tanks. On the Gulf Road leading to Kuwait City, U.S. Marines are engaged in a hellacious fight against an Iraqi armored division. These may be the decisive hours of the war. CBS News will bring you updates on the evolving battles throughout the evening and on America Tonight, right after your late local news. Harry Smith and Paula Zahn will have all the overnight developments on CBS This Morning. Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News, reporting tonight from Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. Good night.